Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is the second episode of Do You Need That Game? Which, to be very clear, you don't need any game. I did this in the last video. Like I said, this is the second one, and I said in the last video, I called it Do You Need That Game? And I got a few comments like, you don't need anything. Yes, you absolutely do not need any single game. The point of this series is to try to take a look at the games I've covered, both the games I've reviewed in the past month, as well as the games I've even just played, and going through them all, trying to look as critically as possible in the vein of, what does that game do differently? Is it special? Is it innovative? Is it better? Did it iterate itself to a point of being a better game, or is it innovative entirely? Basically, the short version of everything is I cover a lot of games on this channel, and to a certain extent there is a degree of hype of the new this, the new that, get this, get that. But at the end of the day, there are many, many good games coming out every single year, and not all of them are essential. None of them are essential, but many of them are just good games, and there's lots of good games. So the question is, which ones of these are great? Which ones of these stood out in some way? And so the point of this series is to look at all these games and briefly talk about what I think made them special or not special, what other games in the similar vein are worth looking at instead, and things like that. And timestamps, of course, always down below. We have all the games on the table here, plus a bunch that aren't on the table because I'm going to be covering roughly 25-30 games, and they won't all fit here. And so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start off. This list is organized mostly in alphabetical order. Let's start off with Agropolis. So Agropolis is going to be the sister game to Sprawlopolis. Maybe this makes this Agropolis, whatever it is. This is going to be a button-shy game of, well, making little cities. So you're going to have, well, farms in this case. You're going to have 3 scoring cards, and you're trying to place out different scoring cards to make different cities to fulfill the scoring criteria. Like I said already, this is going to be a iterative version of Sprawlopolis. Now, my first opinion off the bat is, while I enjoy Agropolis, and while I'm happy that I own this game, if you own Sprawlopolis, I think Sprawlopolis does it better. Agropolis is going to be good for variety, and it's going to be a low price point, so if you like Sprawlopolis, I would probably recommend it. But I think Sprawlopolis is more elegant, more streamlined, quicker to the point. Agropolis adds this concept of these, groupings of animals that can be split into 2, which ends up being a little confusing, a little bit less streamlined. If you don't own Sprawlopolis, other games that would probably be similar is going to be Cascadia from Flat Out Games, that just came out recently. But it gives you a very nice, solid, puzzly feel. I think the price point on Agropolis and Sprawlopolis are cheap and affordable and worth looking into if you like the idea of trying to come up with a little solo puzzle scoring. But if you own Sprawlopolis and you aren't playing it a lot anyways, then I don't think Agropolis is essential. I think it's slightly less ideal than Sprawlopolis. Next up, not on this table, we have Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is going to be from, I should know this, from Triton Noir. From Triton Noir, Assassin's Creed is going to be the second version, so to speak, of V Commandos. V Commandos, which they've renamed to V Sabotage, which is their original game, has a very solid stealth-based approach to, well, the mission objectives. You're going to have different commandos in the original V Commandos, going through different objectives, trying to accomplish what you need while staying hidden as long as possible. Eventually, the alarms will sound, and you'll have to adjust your strategy around the alarms now being off. Assassin's Creed iterates upon that gameplay with a bigger, more expensive, but also better game, which makes it very hard to look at critically in this series, because Assassin's Creed, I think, takes the core concepts of V Commandos, of V Sabotage, and improves upon it. I think it does give you a better game, but it does so with a gigantic box and a very large price point. I would say if you are a huge fan of the V Commando system, or if in general you like the idea of stealth-based games and you haven't really found one that fits, then I think Assassin's Creed, price point and all, is worth looking into. On the other hand, if you haven't played V Commandos, if you don't care for that, if you don't find yourself looking for that, then the price point of Assassin's Creed, good game that it is expensive. You're talking about a $300 plus, buy-in to get the game, to get the content for the game, which is fairly expensive. So I think you have to have that draw in place. Once you have that draw, I do think it's a better version, more mitigation in the stealth system, and it really feels like Assassin's Creed, the video game. So overall, I think it's a great game. I think it's good to look into that one. If you're tempted by it, try V Commandos, V Sabotage first to see if there's a price point, if you like that style, and then from there, you have to be willing to buy into Assassin's Creed, is my point. Next up, we have Barenpark. Barenpark from Mayfair Games. Mayfair? I think from Mayfair. Lookout Spiel. Barenpark is going to be one of my favorite polyomino games. To me, I'm definitely biased here. This is a good point to talk about the fact that my ratings, my opinions on games will certainly bias my opinion of how essential it is. I think Barenpark to me is still the most elegant, simple, accessible of polyomino games. It is one that I find myself recommending to a variety of people, for anyone from gateway gamers. I find children can play it with adults and everyone enjoys it. I think if you have gateway gamers or family gamers in your life, then Barenpark borders on essential. I think if you like polyomino games, I think Barenpark is going to be excellent and just amazing as far as a game to look into. If you don't have as many gateway gamers, if you don't have as many family or kids or children or whatever it is, or significant others who aren't as into gaming, if you don't find yourself needing that, and you still like polyomino games, then I'd recommend looking into Planet Unknown. It's not available yet. It's going to be arriving shortly. I don't know if you can still late pledge it or not, but once it shows up, you should be able to buy it. I think Planet Unknown or Isle of Cats will give you polyomino games with a little bit more depth to it. But if you have any degree of gateway or family or any of that in your life, then Barenpark to me is my favorite and most recommended and most successful when I recommend it in terms of a good game, polyomino, tile laying that is fun to look into. Circle the Wagons. Another button shy game. Circle the Wagons is really well done. I don't have any good examples of a solid 2-player game past, actually Skulls of Sedlec, which we'll talk about soon, but I don't have any good examples of really accessible, really cheap, really solid, and really variable 2-player games that play in like 20 minutes. This one, to me, is a great game. Now, again, it plays 2 players. That's going to be the biggest thing. It also does have a solo mode, but if you want solo modes, I think Sprawlopolis or Agropolis is going to be better. I think Circle the Wagons is a really solid 2-player game, which my wallet is falling apart. Oh no, my wallet's really falling apart. That's unfortunate. But overall, it has a lot of tight decisions. It plays in a short time. It's very cheap, and it's very variable because, again, you have different scoring cards every single time you play. I really think Circle the Wagons is worth picking up if you are someone that ends up playing 2-player filler games that have a decent amount of strategy in them. Really recommend Circle the Wagons. A little drafting. You're going to be laying cards out in a circle. You're going to have different scoring objectives, and then your goal is to pick cards that will most reward the scoring of that circle. I think it's really solid. Easy recommend. Again, 2 players is going to be the key. 2-player filler is going to be the sweet spot. But if that's your thing, then I do recommend Circle the Wagons. Then we have, in a slightly bigger box than Circle the Wagons, we have Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Wars from Peterson Games. Again, my opinions and reviews do certainly color these opinions, so to speak. Now, Cthulhu Wars is a game that I rated a 4 to 5. I do like the game. I think it's excellent. But at the same time, area control as a genre, I find that I have a lot of 5 out of 5s in that genre, and so 4 to 5s don't stay for me. This is a game that Cthulhu Wars is leaving my collection. That said, I think it may have a space for you. Now keep in mind a few things. Cthulhu Wars is going to be area control to begin with. It's going to have a lot of area control, and it's very much in your face in the degree of fighting for different contested territories, to level up your power generation, all these different things, to take control of different gates so you can get doom points, all these things going on in the game. Lots of fun to play Cthulhu Wars. So area control. It's going to have giant hulks of plastic. This is not a cheap game. Again, like Assassin's Creed before it, you're going to want to see enough things about Cthulhu Wars to see if it's a game for you. You're going to want to really look at it, and if you don't find yourself wanting to buy Cthulhu Wars, don't. There's lots of other cheaper games you can try first, cheaper games that, in my opinion, will give you a better experience. In my opinion. Again, that's just where we go into the whole, I like Cthulhu Wars, but I don't love Cthulhu Wars. I'd recommend Blood Rage any single day of the week over Cthulhu Wars, but it depends what you value. You see, Cthulhu Wars prioritizes asymmetric factions over developed asymmetry. Developed asymmetry is going to be the concept that as you play the game, you're going to make choices that will end your clan, your faction up in a different spot. In Cthulhu Wars, you simply start with different gods, different elder ones, different units, and you will still develop your own faction, but it's much more limited because you can only develop and build within your faction. This is a game that has a ton of expansion content, which will further add to that price point, which doesn't start off cheap to begin with. So again, another factor to consider. Overall, for me, I don't consider Cthulhu Wars essential. I think there are better area control games that are cheaper and give you a more varied experience and don't give you the temptation of, do I get, the $200 base game, or do I spend $2,000 to get absolutely everything for the game? Like Assassin's Creed, look into it, make sure you really want it, People do love this game. It is very, very highly rated, so factor that in, especially if you like the Cthulhu mythos, if you like asymmetric powers, if you like area control, there is enough here to look into. For me, it is lower down that totem pole of area control games. Next up, we have Decrypto. Decrypto is going to be a very unique feeling party game. This is a game in which you are going to be having, you're going to have two teams. It's going to be a game where, to begin with, the first thing you want to be aware of is it's going to play best at 6+ players. You can play it at 4 players, but that's not where it's going to shine. I would say 6 or more, basically teams of 3 or more, is going to be where Decrypto shines. Now, Decrypto is incredibly innovative and unique in the way it handles that party game / strategy game genre. Is going to be in the same category as games like Codenames. Codenames is just going to be a game that I easily recommend, but it's going to have a very similar feeling to it, although I will say that Decrypto potentially offers more depth while also being more complicated to jump into. So Codenames is still going to be my go-to pick when recommending a party game that is incredibly strategic and a lot of fun. Decrypto is going to be my second pick, or if you like Codenames, if you're looking for something more, then Decrypto is arguably better. Depends on, who you're talking to, but different people have different opinions. I personally still resonate more with Codenames, but Decrypto, every time I play it, I enjoy it more and more, and especially if you're playing with the same people who get the game, it is an incredibly solid gaming experience. You see, in the game, you're giving clues to your team back and forth. The goal as the clue giver is to obfuscate the clues that you're giving, so that your team is going to figure out what the clues are, but the opposing team won't. But the opposing team is going to be paying enough attention that over time they'll effectively be able to break your code. Really innovative in what it's doing. For me, this along with Codenames is going to be amongst my two, maybe this, Codenames, and Monikers are going to be my 3 favorite party games to recommend to people. So is it absolutely essential? No, get Codenames first in my opinion, but this is pretty high up there, so Decrypto. And also, not that expensive either. Next up, we have Harry Potter Defense Against the Dark Arts. It's going to be a 2-player head-to-head game. It's going to be the 2-player version of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I think there are better games out there. I think that if you like 2-player deck builders, Star Realms, Shards of Infinity, those are going to be solid examples of Arthurian Guilds. Those are going to be solid examples of games that give you that same experience, but better, in my opinion. I think if you want the Harry Potter deck building, get Hogwarts Battle. And if you want 2-player deck building, get any of those others I just mentioned. Probably Shards of Infinity. Probably Star Realms. Star Realms is one of the ones that has really held up as a quick, solid, accessible 2-player head-to-head. You can also get the Hero Realms if you prefer fantasy to space. But yeah, it's not that Harry Potter Defense Against the Dark Arts is bad. It's that if you want the theme, get the 4-player version. And if you want the 2-player head-to-head, get Star Realms or something else instead. Then we have Dice Throne, which I can't find my box for Dice Throne. Dice Throne is going to be a 2-player, well, primarily 2-player, you can play it with more. It's going to be a 2-player Yahtzee-esque style gameplay, where you pick different characters, you roll your dice, you level up your characters, all of that. It's very interesting and hard to recommend or not recommend Dice Throne. Dice Throne has some of the most beautiful art I've seen in any game, some of the most deluxe components, especially if you have, Season 1 rerolled or any of the Season 2 content. Incredibly deluxe, and it's very simple and streamlined and fun to jump into. Where I hiccup a bit with Dice Throne is the asymmetric players, because every single character is asymmetric with different abilities, different tokens, all of that. I find that it's a game that if you're playing it very infrequently, get 2 sets. Get the monk versus the dwarf. Get any 2 sets, the cowboy versus the gunslinger, whatever it is. Cowboy is the gunslinger. Whatever it is, find any 2-player set if you're playing it infrequently, and grow to learn those characters as you play it infrequently. If you're playing it frequently, then get more of it. They have tons of different character options in front of you. I think the thing you want to avoid with Dice Throne to get the best experience out of it is you don't want to be getting all the characters if you're playing it infrequently. Because the problem you run into there is that you don't know the character depth well enough. You find yourself playing the game without really understanding how the tokens play out. So you have this lighter, accessible gameplay that becomes obfuscated in the not complexity, but just the lack of knowing everything in it. So I find Dice Throne thrives as a game that you're either playing a lot and you have a lot, or you're playing a little and you have a little. Don't get a lot and play it a little bit, in my opinion. Those caveats aside, Dice Throne offers fairly rewarding gameplay. It's fairly simple, streamlined, it's quick to play, quick to whatever. It doesn't have a ton of depth. That's the big thing you're going to want to factor in before you get Dice Throne. The depth of the game is, I would argue, limited. I'm sure you'll find people who are like, no, the depth here, the depth there. Could be. I find it is more surface level, rolling dice, Yahtzee-esque, drawing cards, a lot of fun. There are decisions to be made for sure, but most of the decisions I would argue are mostly scripted, with the occasional harder choice as to which card to play, which card to upgrade, when to try to go for a combo. Occasional decisions, most of the time it's going to be fairly obvious. But it really, it's a good gateway game. It's simple, it is beautiful, it's just those caveats they gave us to how to dive into it are going to be the biggest thing with Dice Throne. Then we have Divinus. Divinus from Lucky Duck Games that actually just ended on Kickstarter. Divinus is a tough one to, so to speak, because the first thing I'll say about Divinus is if you haven't gotten My City first, get My City. Divinus is offering incredibly light legacy gameplay. It's going to be tiling. You're going to be grabbing tiles from the board, putting them to your board. There's going to be a bit of a story element as you make decisions. Do you build a fortress? Do you build a bunch of stones or Stonehenge thing? There are going to be story decisions in Divinus that will change it from the My City gameplay. But at its core, it is a light legacy style gameplay, and My City will give you a far cheaper entry point to that genre. That said, if you already like My City, and you want more along the lines of My City, then I think Divinus is very good. It is expensive. I enjoy Divinus a lot. All my hedging around Divinus that I've done on this channel comes down to comparing it to My City and the price points and content you get. But if you enjoy My City, if you're looking for more legacy gameplay, if you like legacy gameplay, if you've played Pandemic already, and you find that you enjoy that style of gameplay, then I do recommend Divinus as a really enjoyable experience that I am eager and looking to dive back into, especially in the final days of the GameFound campaign. If you missed it, they added in a reset pack for free. So now, for that same price point you were paying for Divinus, you're getting twice the gameplay content. You can pass it on to a friend, or you can just go through it again a second time yourself. Overall, Divinus is very enjoyable. I don't think it's essential in terms of, I think My City would be my first recommendation, but if you like Legacy and you like lighter games and you find yourself playing with couples or friends or whoever it is, then yeah, there's not a lot of lighter Legacy games out there, and Divinus will fit the bill there. Next up, we have Dragonbond. Dragonbond is not here. Dragonbond Lords of Vala. Dragonbond Lords of Vala is going to be a very unique system. This is a game that's currently on Kickstarter, I believe, when this video goes up. But Dragonbond Lords of Vala is going to be offering you a game that, in my opinion, is a very, very good game to get your hands on if you want something that's going to play well at 4, probably play well at 6 as well. Other player counts I am less confident on in terms of how well it plays, but it will offer you fairly fast gameplay. So especially if you get the Kickstarter with the 5 to 6 player expansion, this is a game that will give you a 90-minute long 6-player experience with area control and action programming and combining for teams. A lot of fun things going on, and the fast playtime is really going to be the selling point of Dragonbond Lords of Vala. For me, I think it really is the selling point. My comparison point is going to be Ethnos. Ethnos is a really solid game that people really enjoy it, but it looks kind of meh and isn't that special. But it kind of works because it's an area control game that's just really fast paced and everyone's just taking actions one at a time, and you could have a 6-player game of Ethnos that lasts 75 minutes. I think Dragonbond's going to fit in the same spot. It's a game where you're going to have a dragon and a general, and they can bond effectively. And as you bond, it's going to force other players to look into the concept of whether it's worth bonding themselves. Very interesting gameplay, very unique. That team aspect, that kind of forced team aspect, does really work well, but it's really going to be the simple gameplay, the action programming, the very quick gameplay, and the player counts, quick gameplay at 6 players, which is where I'm going to be looking at it most. So I don't think it's amazing. I think it's a fast-playing game at 4 or 6 players with area control and action programming. So in that sense, I think it's a solid game. Ethnos is going to be my closest comparison. Both of you like Ethnos, look at Dragonbond. And if you don't like Dragonbond, or if you don't have Ethnos, maybe look at Ethnos first, because I think you can have a little more gameplay content out of that for a slightly cheaper price point. Next up, we have Exploding Kittens lineup of games. The Exploding Kittens lineup of games is going to be a review I did with Ricky, where we have Filter Burrito, Exploding Kittens, we have Tackle Cat Spelled Backwards, we have Neanderthals, Poetry for Neanderthals, and a game of Cat and Mouth. Short version there, I think Throw Burrito is going to give you a very unique party experience that is unlike anything else you will get, and I think Exploding Kittens is actually a very solid party game for those who are not into, well, designer board games. That said, for the most part, I would probably pass on almost all of them in terms of games I would recommend. They are not games I'd recommend. I'd recommend Throw Burrito, I guess, for the right group of people who are just looking for something that's going to be ridiculous and fun. You're staying at a cottage, everyone's going to be getting drunk, and you're going to be tossing burritos at each other. Sure, it's going to give you a definitely fun party experience. I don't classify any of them in the same vein of designer games experiences, and very rarely would I really recommend them. While having enjoyed them, I would not really recommend them that much or often. Then we have Flamecraft. Flamecraft by Cardboard Alchemy, currently on Kickstarter. This is one that falls in the category of, for me, the way I compared this one to Century Golem Edition or Century Spice Road or to Splendor. It's a game where you're going to have delightful artwork, you're going to have little dragons going around different shops and trying to gather different resources, and then you have to choose between enchanting the shop and activating all the dragons, or between, well, putting down new dragons and getting different resources and activating a dragon at the shop. It has fun and simple decisions. It has fast gameplay. It's easy to teach, easy to play, and very adorable. So I compare it to that gateway accessibility that you're going to get from games like Century or Splendor. Where I would say in terms of do you need it or not, I'd recommend Century or Splendor first, honestly. Those are both games that have really stood the test of time, or even games like Sagrada. There are a lot of fun, light games that have really stood the test of time that people recommend, people play, and do really well. If you like that, then sure, get Flamecraft. And if you want the artwork, I haven't found anything that really compares to the artwork of Flamecraft. As far as the gameplay alone, I would be wary of recommending this over things that have really stood the test of time, so I'd recommend those first, and if you have those first, maybe there's only so many lighter gateway games you need. I do enjoy Flamecraft, but again, it's in that category and a little bit below in terms of the gameplay reward, so to speak, the gameplay loop and how much fun it is to build up your engine in those games. Then we have the Grand Carnival. The Grand Carnival is going to be a game that's like Barenpark. I have a Play This Not That where I compare the two games. And the Grand Carnival is going to be a polyomino-esque game in which you're going to be gathering polyominoes and building out a carnival. I think it's a really solid polyomino game if you are looking for the next level. If you have games like Barenpark and people in your group, if you really enjoy Isle of Cats and you want something more akin to that than to Barenpark, then yes, get the Grand Carnival. It's going to offer you more depth as you play it, more depth as you have to lay out the fairgrounds and then build up your parks and then move your guests through it. Offers a lot of interesting decisions around it that don't come down purely to put a polyominoes out. That said, if you don't find yourself gravitating more towards games like Isle of Cats, if you find yourself gravitating more towards lighter, simpler, streamlined polyomino games like Patchwork and Barenpark, then I think the Grand Carnival may not see as much playtime for you. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for in a polyomino game. Are you looking for a little bit more depth, a little bit more strategy, or do you just like laying Tetris pieces out? If the latter, then I'd pass on the Grand Carnival and get Barenpark instead. If the former, then I really enjoy the Grand Carnival and think it's a solid addition. Then we have Imperium Classics over here. The Imperium line of games is a tough one for me, and this is one of those which is going to be very much biased by my own enjoyment of the game. I did not like Imperium Classics. I thought the gameplay was solid. I didn't find any moments of quote-unquote fun in the game, so it's very hard for me to gauge where to put it in a do you need it category. The game is incredibly unique in the way it's approaching deck building. It's doing a lot of things very innovatively, and the variety of different classes you have all these different tribes or factions, whatever it is, both in the classics and in the legends, and you're going to be playing as all these different factions that all have their own unique rules as far as how you engage it. The amount of gameplay you have in the box, gameplay that's going to be rewarding both at solo as well as at 2 players, I would be wary of higher player counts, both from people who like the game and from people who don't like the game. It is a game that tends to be on the longer side. So playing this at 3 players, I really would not recommend it if you're looking for a longer deck builder. At shorter player counts, the amount of variability you have, it makes this a game that I would recommend in terms of if you're looking for that kind of depth, if you're looking for that kind of strategy in your deck builders, then Imperium Classics may well work for you. But if you are someone like myself who's looking for more of the fun moments in games, and Imperium Classics is all about, the Imperium line of games is all about the optimization, all about how well can you min-max your way towards victory, while for me I didn't find there to be fun moments. So if you want that a higher degree of strategy and tons of variability, there's a lot packed into this box. But if you're looking for things that are just more quote-unquote fun, I don't really know how to define that, then Imperium Classics was a pass for me. Then we have Legend Academy. Legend Academy, a game currently on GameFound. Legend Academy to me is, the quote I have on the page is, this is everything that I like in games, and I very much mean that about Legend Academy. Legend Academy has deck building, it has card crafting, it has adventuring around on a map, and it has incredibly tight decisions as you make. Basically, you have 8 turns in the game. You have 4 turns on one map, then 4 turns on another map, but in between each turn, you're leveling up, so it gives you this constant feel of progression. And if you play it right, you're constantly cycling your whole deck. For me, I really enjoy Legend Academy, and I think it gives me a lot of different things to focus on. I don't have any solid comparisons as far as games that are going to give me that much powering up in that short and condensed a session. The thing I'm most going to compare it to is Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones is going to be, in my opinion, a far better game than Legend Academy, but one that is also heavier, more serious, and requires more learning just to get into it. So Legend Academy to me is the more accessible version of Too Many Bones, and be very, very hesitant before you take that as a recommendation, because I'm sure there are people who love Too Many Bones who do not find themselves gravitating as much towards Legend Academy. For me, it's the same system of progression, just one gives me more depth and more complexity and a fun experience. The other is just easier to jump into and easier to play. I really do recommend Legend Academy. As far as the do you need it or not, my biggest concern would be something I touched upon in my review already, which is I said it's a game that currently, in the current state that I've played it, it still needs to be tested further, play tested further. It felt broken to me in the sense that every time I played the game as a specific character, I was able to power through with that character. So she may still need to be nerfed or balanced a bit more, and that's going to be something I'm definitely going to warn people about. That said, I'm very much looking forward to the final game of Legend Academy. Then we have Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road. This is an interesting one. Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road, I really enjoyed. I gave this one a 4 to 5. This is going to be a heavy Euro where you have 12 decisions the whole entire game, 12 decisions to utilize towards everything you want to do in the game. As far as the do you need it or not, the short version for Merv is going to be, while I really like Merv, if you have any of these other games in the genre, if you have Coimbra, if you have Lorenzo Magnifico, if you have, what else is there? Grand Austria Hotel, Voyages of Marco Polo. There's a ton of games out there, Solkin, ton of heavy games out there that give you really crunchy, meaty Euro experiences. And I think Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road is going to be just one more of those. Not in a bad way. If you like that game, if you like that genre, and you want one more, then by all means. But I don't think Merv does anything special that makes it better if you already have those and you're not playing them enough. I think those are all solid games, and Merv is another in that vein of crunchy, heavy Euros with minimal actions and trying to optimize around it. Then we have MicroMacro. This is a game that is incredibly unique in what it's doing. MicroMacro is the Where's Waldo of board games. It gives you a very unique story-driven experience as you try to figure out what happened by following people around this map. The gameplay is non-existent. There's no gameplay. The gameplay all comes down to looking at pictures and trying to figure out what happened by playing Where's Waldo on a giant map. Very innovative, very unique. If that appeals to you, if you like experiential games that aren't necessarily as much of a game as they are an experience, then I think MicroMacro is incredibly unique, and the closest thing it's going to be compared to is going to be an escape room, while feeling very different than an escape room game. But it really depends on if you're okay with a lack of mechanical anything in your game. There's no mechanics. It's just looking at a map and following the story in this game. Then we have My City, which I've been playing a lot this past month. My City, compared to Iterative Divinus. My City, I really enjoy. My biggest problem with My City is going to be if you don't like lighter games, understand that My City has 24 games all slowly iterating upon the next. It's very cheap. It's very easy to jump into. It has polyominoes. All those things might sound like a win for you, and if you enjoy those things, then I recommend My City. The biggest warning I would give about it is, like I said, 24 games, all with the most minor senses of progression along the way. That's going to be roughly 12 hours of gameplay, depending on who you're playing with or whatnot. Solid amount of gameplay you get for the $25, $35 price point that you get. But it depends. You have to like polyominoes. You have to be fine with lighter games. And if so, then I recommend My City. If you're not fine with polyomino games, if you're not the kind of person who will play Barenpark 24 times, well, My City is basically playing Barenpark 24 times with minor iterative rules along the way. Then we have Patchwork. Patchwork over here. Patchwork is going to be, there's a lot of polyomino games today. Patchwork is going to be giving you more polyomino gameplay. This is going to be one of the first ones that I want to say really made polyomino games popular. From Uwe Rosenberg, this is going to be the first of his quadrology. He has, I think, 5 games. He has 5 polyomino games. This is going to be the 2-player one, and one that continues to be recommended. This Patchwork Express, this Patchwork Doodle. Really just stick with Patchwork. That's going to be the best of the Patchwork series, in my opinion. But overall, Patchwork is Still a solid polyomino game that's all purely about the polyominoes. There's nothing else mixing it up. Like I said earlier already, it depends what you're looking for in polyomino games. Are you looking for streamlined, pure polyomino or something different? If you want something different, then skip Patchwork, move on to something with a little bit more depth, a little bit more other things going on in the game. If you just like pure polyomino, then Patchwork is a 2-player game. Understand that, but it is one of the ones that really made polyominoes popular in my opinion, and one that's still worth playing today. Then we have Raja's, the Dice Charmers, what's it called? Raja's Roll and Write, the Dice Charmers. Raja's is going to be the roll and write version of Rajas of the Ganges. If you haven't played Rajas of the Ganges, it's a fantastic game. We can talk about that another time. For me, Rajas of the Ganges roll and write is really good. I actually really like this roll and write game, and I think it's a solid roll and write, well, game. But for me, what I would say about this one is it's going to be in the vein of games like Fleet, like Ganshun Clever. So if you already have complex interweaving systems in your roll and write games, well, I mean, this is fine, but they already exist. So it depends on whether you're looking for more. If, like myself, you really like roll and writes and you really like complex roll and writes in particular, then I think Raja's Dice Charmers is one that's going to give you, it's not going to give you Hadrian's Wall level depth or Roman Roll, but it's going to give you depth somewhere in the vein of Ganshun Clever, perhaps a little lighter, but it's one that I've really been enjoying. This is one that has blown me away in terms of, I find these iterations of games that get turned into roll and writes, they often let you down. Raja's Dice Charmers definitely did not let me down. Really enjoying this one. Then we have Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria down here. Shadows of Kingdoms of Valeria is going to give you dice drafting. So dice drafting, the game I'm most going to compare this to is actually a game by, well, the same designer, by Stan Kudonsky, which is going to be Old West Impresiaro. And that is both those games are going to be games where you're rolling dice into an area, and then you're picking dice and taking the associated action. I like Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria. It is going to be another game in the Valeria universe. I would say, it's hard to really say about this one. How do I recommend or not recommend this one? I enjoy the gameplay. It's going to be a lighter game. If you like Valeria Card Kingdoms, then I think Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria is going to give you different gameplay with the same feeling of progression, the same feeling of build-up. I do enjoy Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria, while also not feeling it's necessarily essential. There are a lot of good games out there that have lighter, accessible gameplay. Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria is fun, but I don't know if it's necessarily amazingly fun. It's really good. I really like it. But there's a lot of, I'm trying to think of other games I'd compare to. The Valeria universe is going to be the biggest thing. I think I'd recommend Card Kingdoms of Valeria before I'd recommend Shadow Kingdoms. Different gameplay, but same feeling of progression, same feeling. I'd recommend games like Five Tribes, which is a different game. To be very clear, it's a different game. It's just, those are games that give me the same feel. This is going to be Gateway Plus. A lot of rewarding decisions to be made, but also still on the lighter side. And not a ton of depth, just a feeling of progression that is enjoyable as you go through it. Then we have Skulls of Sedlec. Skulls of Sedlec, which is going to be another 2-player filler game that I'd recommend along with Circle the Wagons. Honestly, in terms of both these games, I'd probably recommend Circle the Wagons for a little bit more variability, but I think I like Skulls of Sedlec a little bit more. So really, I recommend both of them. They're both cheap, they're both great, they're both a solid 2-player games you can play. I believe there's a solo mode for Skulls of Sedlec as well. I haven't actually played it, but overall, the price point compared to the depth, if you're looking for 2 players light filler games, Skulls of Sedlec and Circle the Wagons are amongst my 2 favorite there. Then we have Spire's End Hildegard. Spire's End Hildegard, which I think just ended the Kickstarter. That is one that, for me, is giving you a good narrative experience. But it's also giving you, at least based on where I am so far, I only had access to the first chapter, keep that in mind, prototype, so all those things are, a little limited in my experience. But Spire's End Hildegard is going to be one that the gameplay is going to be mechanically light, and the story is going to be a lot of fun. It has a choose-your-own-adventure vibe as you go through it. If that's your thing, if you like the idea of choose-your-own-adventure stories, well, then I think Spire's End is giving you great art and a great sense of progression and a lot of different pathways that genuinely felt like different pathways with minimal amounts of interweaving and hitting the same story point, again, based on the one chapter I went through. But if you're looking for something with a little bit more mechanics, then I think Spire's End is going to be not necessarily for you. The mechanics in that game, at least so far, have been on the lighter end there. Then we have The Mind, another game that, like MicroMacro, is not so much a game as it is an experience. In The Mind, you're going to be holding up cards. You're going to have different players, all with their cards, and then the goal is to play your card in the order of the numbers. So if I have a 3 and a 4, if I have a 3 and a 73, and you have a 2 and a 92, you need to make sure that you get your 2 out before I get my 3 out, and then I need to get my 73 out before you get your 92 out. But you have any number between 2 to 4 players over here, and you're going to have different numbers of cards in your hand as you level up. it really is an interesting experience of trying to get multiple people on the same mental wavelength. It is one that I recommend playing more than owning, but if you do own it, this is a game that for me is a late at night filler game when we're all tired and we want some laughing, or basically it's one we pull out infrequently, and then eventually we win it. And when we win it, because you get through those 10 levels and you manage to actually survive, which is really hard and really rewarding, and then it goes on the shelf for another year and a half before you pull it out again. It is a solid experience, but it's not so much a game as it is an experience of multiple people just getting on the same wavelength of being able to read each other. Now, there are people who will ruin the game by being like, well, just count in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, as before you play a card. It's not a game for people like that. It's a game for those who are not going to make up their rules, but rather just trying to read the situation and slowly adapt to be on that same wavelength. Solid, enjoyable experience, but like MicroMacro, it's not about the gameplay as it is about the unique experience it provides. And then lastly, we have Under Falling Skies. And Under Falling Skies is going to be one that I really recommend this one. This is one of my favorite solo games with a lot of depth to the playtime it gives you. It's going to give you a playtime of roughly, it depends, anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes, I would say, although it could run another 30 to 40 minutes if you are a little bit more AP, analysis paralysis prone, if you want to take your time with the decisions. It's a game you could play with more than one player, but really is going to thrive solo. To me, the game I'm going to most compare this to, in terms of if you're looking for a similar experience, is going to be Bullet from Level 99 Games. Bullet from Level 99 Games is going to give me solo gameplay that is not as good as Under Falling Skies, but Bullet will give you multiplayer gameplay that is much better than what Under Falling Skies has to offer. So if you are someone that is on a gaming budget, it depends on what you play primarily. If you play primarily solo, then Under Falling Skies is going to be the way to go. I much prefer this gameplay in terms of the solo experience it gives me. But if you are someone that plays at both player counts and you only can get one, then I would recommend Bullet, which is going to give you solid gameplay for solo that is going to feel very similar, but it's going to reward you by giving you a much better multiplayer experience as well. And that is everything in the Do You Need It roundup for this month. I think I need to be a little bit more cutthroat with these. It's always hard because the truth of the matter is I like a lot of these games and it's hard to be more cutthroat. I think I'm going to start trying to come to this list with direct recommendations as to why you shouldn't get them. I think I need to lean more towards why you shouldn't get them than why you could argue it either way. To be a bit more cutthroat, I actually have, if you're made it to the end of this video already, by the way, first of all, great job sticking around, but I have a Patreon exclusive series that I do the same thing for Kickstarter, where I aggressively try to attack all the reasons why you shouldn't back Kickstarters. I think I need to take the same approach with this list because I find that I'm a bit more wishy-washy because I enjoy them. Because there are a lot of solid games that I can recommend. Decrypto, Barenpark, Merv, Shadow Kingdoms, half the things on this table, if not more, are really enjoyable experiences that I need to start being a drop more cutthroat if I'm going to successfully convince you that no, you don't need that game. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video. Next time I will try to be more cutthroat, but as always, have a good one.